Hi, I'm Prophet Azad, and you're watching Atheist Edge.
Talking about supernatural entities and religious people who believe in witchcraft and believing in pets that can be used. This is still going on in Africa. In Nigeria, to be precise. Very recently, you only need to look in the social media and to look in the things that I posted. Some people believe, especially for some reason, believe that cats, birds, especially birds that are not your regular birds that you see every day, like an owl or a bat. Oh, the bats, oh, the bats. Oh, don't talk about bats when it comes to the religious people. And the people who peddle this lie are the pastors and the preachers. Can you imagine? The pastor and the preacher would tell a follower, member, that God told me to tell you that your mother is the cause of your problems. And she turns into a cat at night. So if you see a cat in the middle of the night just walking around, you should kill it. Animals have died because people assume that they are cats. And also in the news, you hear things like a man was caught and he was caught changing from an animal into a cat. So you see a dead cat and people would say, I saw it with my eyes. It was a man. He turned into a cat. Oh, it's devilish. It's demonic. And they will kill such. My problem is, if your God is so big and powerful, why can he not save you from the witches? And why do we have to kill innocent animals for this lie? And the pastors and the preachers who peddle and push this lie, shame on all of you. Shame on each and every one of you for doing such.
Odds are everything your religious leader has ever told you about atheists is wrong. To set the record straight, one, atheists don't go through life with the feeling like something is missing. We have roughly 80 years, a cosmic drop in the bucket to love, laugh, create, share, explore, enjoy, and wonder. How much more meaning do you need? Two, despite what your pastor tells you, former theists who deconverted were once just as pious and sincere as you. They were never true believers to begin with, you say? Tell that to atheist personalities such as Jerry DeWitt, a former pastor of 2 evangelical churches, Matt Dillahunty, a fundamentalist Christian for over 20 years with aspirations of life in the ministry, or Dan Barker, former missionary, evangelist, music minister, and pastor of 3 churches. We are just as moral as theists, if not more so. Cultural norms instill a sense of right and wrong. Without them, societies would never have developed. We are born with a sense of empathy, as are many of our mammalian cousins. Furthermore, the use of reason and logic leads us to see the multitude of personal and societal benefits of doing the greatest possible amount of help and the least possible amount of harm.
Which ones kind of jump out at you?
Well, I think one of the ones that really bugs me is you were never really a true fill in the blank, right? Which is horseshit. I think everyone who was ever involved with a religion, myself, I wasn't so much of a believer. I believed that there might be a God, but the religion part was really kind of like I could put it aside. But I believed at one time, and it was sincere at one time, but eventually it kind of faded away. So
for me, I never thought about the idea of something missing. but I know I've definitely spent a lot of time trying to figure out what other people believe they are seeing and why I'm not seeing it. So, that was something that I struggled with a lot, I think, when I was younger, because it's actually very scary to me, worrisome. Not that there was something there that I wasn't seeing, but I didn't understand how to get into the mindset and of what other people, were claiming, and how to bridge that gap.
Makes sense.
I also get caught up when people say that someone is more moral than someone else, as if it's necessarily quantifiable. And when people talk about someone being more moral than someone else, a lot of times there's this, they're saying that someone is better than someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But just because someone has more beliefs than someone else, or has maybe, I guess, a more strict moral code than someone else, I can kind of understand when someone is saying someone is more moral than someone else. But to necessarily think that someone is better than someone else because they have more morals, it just it doesn't sync up with me.
Right. There's an old saying, your beliefs don't make you a better person. Your behavior does.
Absolutely.
Sadiq Khan is London's first Muslim mayor. He assures he is a moderate Muslim. But as the author of this book explained earlier, there's no such thing as a moderate. You either follow the teachings of your book, or you do not. One of Khan's first orders of business was to ban all advertisements on the London Underground which depict women in sexy underwear, swimsuits, etc. Further, he routinely attends events where women are forced to cover their heads and stand in the back away from the men. This type of headline is common in England's newspapers nowadays. London Mayor Sadiq Khan gave a speech in Manchester on behalf of the EU Remain campaign, with women noticeably absent from the front of the crowd. When asked to respond to these concerns, Khan always avoids a direct response. Here is a most telling quote from the late great Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. "I'm sometimes asked, when will there be enough women on the court? And I say, when there are 9. And people are shocked. But there had been 9 men, and nobody said a word about that." So over the centuries, whenever a Christian mayor of London invoked the Christian God or Jesus in an invocation or dedication or otherwise, did anyone ever raise a question about that? Sheesh, the British Parliament, which is the equivalent of the United States Senate and House of Representatives, reserves 26 seats in its House of Lords for the Lords Spiritual. These are bishops, and not just any bishops, but Anglican bishops from the Church of England. The kings and queens of England have not only been the ruler, or now figurehead, of the United Kingdom and the commander-in-chief of its armed forces, they are simultaneously the head of the Church of England. So if you're going to be ruling people and helping make decisions on how its armed forces operate, you better include the higher-ups of your own church in on these government debates. Because Lord knows the last thing you want to do is run afoul of your particular version of Yahweh. You know, the one who has wholly invented the entire denomination because Henry VIII wanted to divorce his first wife because the damned Catholic Pope wouldn't allow it. All of these examples just point to why striving for a completely secular government benefits everybody. There's so much less chance of any section of the population being marginalized, whether it's women, non-heterosexuals, ethnic minorities, and of course, non-believers.
If life on the planet ever becomes extinct, it will probably be because of one of the following: abrupt climate change, greenhouse gases, asteroid impact, the Yellowstone caldera supereruption, global viral pandemic. This is 2021, we are recording this. Global fungus or bacterial pandemic, thermonuclear war, the sentience of artificial intelligence, overpopulation and mass starvation, or eventually the sun will begin expanding in 1 to 2 billion years, making Earth inhospitable. The least probable causes are divine wrath, supernatural phenomena, fire, the surface of the earth will twist. The simple point is, these claims are not supported, at least in the text of the various probabilities of various things happening. Although I agree, intuitively, scientifically, it does certainly seem to me that divine wrath is a lesser probable cause than global pandemic, but it is not supported inside the text.
No, I didn't believe this when I first read it. But anyway, prominent Pakistani nuclear scientist Bashiruddin Mahmood has published several papers stating that the world's energy crisis could be solved by tapping into the limitless energy potential of magical desert fire demons. And you have a footnote here, New York Times article, Pakistani atomic expert arrested last week had strong pro-Taliban views. Obviously, the article had its own particular angle, but it did include this. November 2001 is the article. It's actually true. I looked into this and it's like, oh my God. It goes on. So you actually have a quote from the article, and this is the direct quote of the dude that we're talking about. I think, this is him speaking, I think that if we developed our souls, we can develop communication with Djinn. Every new idea has its opponents, but there is no reason for this controversy over Islam and science, because there is no conflict between Islam and science, because we can just, that's the end of his quote, but because we can just scientifically interact with genies, we can have a whole demonology would be an actual scientific field, according to this fellow. So,
Christians have nothing on Muslims as far as holding up their holy book and saying, look, we predicted this science and this science. You know, Islam takes credit for any scientific achievement and said, oh yeah, it's right here in the Quran.
Well, Christians do that too, right? They have the whole Genesis predicted the Big Bang thing. They try to argue that there's a spherical earth argued for in the Bible. There's tons of things like that ridiculous claims. I find in general, Islamic apologetics is about 50 to 100 years behind Christian apologetics. Because if you go back to like the 1920s and look at the weird batshit stuff that fundamentalist Christians were arguing then, it's very similar. Like the naivety of the arguments and so on. I think it's because Christians have had to deal with criticism for so long. They couldn't suppress it. That they've had to get more sophisticated, and so it's harder to find these weirdos. They still exist. You find weird Christians have weird ideas. But whereas the Muslim world has been so impoverished, and then also so busy suppressing dissent that they've never had to deal with actual criticism. And so when you see the Muslim apologetics, it's just really naive and really silly.
That may be, but they certainly, the Muslim apologists I've seen in debates seem awfully sure of themselves and awfully confident.
I mean, that's all religious people, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're all absolutely confident that they're right. I mean, really, it's all, I should say, all delusional people. So whether it's QAnon or a flat earther or even white supremacists, like they just have these freaky, bizarre worldviews, and they are absolutely sure that they're right, and no evidence can ever defeat them. That's the problem, right? But over time, I think Christian creationism has dealt with so much criticism that it's been ridiculed effectively for so long that they've had to sort of shift their arguments. Now, you still find crazy, like Ken Ham stuff is ridiculous and laughable. But then you have, and then some of the answers in Genesis stuff. But then you have like the Discovery Institute, which is trying to make it respectable, trying to downplay their belief in demons. You can find various scholars who you catch them in a candid moment, like Craig Keener. They have batshit crazy ideas about demons and demonology and magic and things like that. That fits right into what this guy's talking about. But they know not to talk about it publicly to non-Christians, right? So because they know they'll be laughed out of court with it.
I know you're more a New Testament guy, but you've of course heard of genie. There's about 4 different ways to spell it, but the desert fire demons.
Yeah, well, I mean, that wasn't the only kind, right? So there was a ton of them. Basically, they're the Zoroastrian equivalent of demons. demons and angels, right? So like Zoroastrianism came with demonology and angelology. And then when the Zoroastrian was a Persian religion, so when Persia took over and turned Judea into an independent satrapy where the Jews could go back and rebuild their temple, they picked up tons of Zoroastrian ideas and interjected them into their Judaism. So the idea of a general resurrection at the end of the world, the idea of the end of the world, the idea of angels and demons and complex angelology and demonology with hierarchies and so on. All of that comes from Zoroastrianism, and it got interjected into Judaism and then from Judaism into Christianity. So if you go back to a different linguistic route through Arabic and so on, back into Farsi and so on, and you get to the Djinn, what you're looking at there is just a different linguistic tradition for the exact same angelology and demonology that has got transformed in its own way. So really, it's the same as if a Christian were to say this, if we could have... There was an article, oh my God, there was a real article where someone asked a Christian pastor in the US, this is fairly recently, like within the last 20 years, asked him, would there be roads in heaven or something like that? And this pastor goes on about, oh yeah, there'll be roads and there'll be angels drive cars there. You won't have to drive because the angels will drive. And I mean, it had this whole elaborate, bizarre idea of what's in heaven. And you're like, what are you basing this on? Like they're just picking it out of their head. But it's similar. So you, in candid moments, you can get some of the more hardcore Christians to admit their bizarre angelology and demonology. What we have here as a Muslim is just up there with it. Like, oh yeah, why don't we just do a science of demons, and then we'll be good to go.
I got my 60 calorie antioxidant seltzer, hard seltzer.
And I'm drinking Oban.
Oh, is that the blended or a single malt?
Oh, it's a single malt. It's a nice scotch. Yeah.